The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my apartment door like a knife between ribs. Cream cardstock, expensive embossing, my ex-fiancé Marcus Chen's name printed in elegant script next to hers, Victoria Ashford. The venue address made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you, Rosewood Manor Estate. My estate, the one Marcus didn't know I owned. I sat at my small kitchen table, the morning light streaming through windows that overlooked a view Marcus had always called depressingly modest. The invitation trembled slightly in my hands, not from shock, but from the sudden rush of possibility flooding through my veins. 3 years. 3 years I'd spent planning our wedding at Rosewood Manor, touring the grounds every weekend, marking up floor plans, tasting catering samples. 3 years of Marcus nodding along, pretending to care about centerpieces and seating charts while secretly texting Victoria behind my back. I pulled out my laptop, fingers moving across the keys with practiced efficiency. A few clicks brought up the hidden folder I'd created 18 months ago, when my private investigator first confirmed what I'd suspected. Inside were documents that told a story Marcus thought he'd buried. My ownership of Rosewood Manor, purchased through a web of LLCs and trust funds, completely untraceable to me. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to where this really began. 4 years ago, I was Emma Sullivan, senior architect at Heritage Design Group, working 70-hour weeks and loving every minute of it. I'd grown up watching my mother clean other people's houses, her hands raw from chemicals, her back bent from years of scrubbing floors in mansions she'd never afford. She died when I was 19, leaving me with nothing but a fierce determination to build something that couldn't be taken away. By 28, I'd made junior partner. By 30, I'd designed 3 award-winning buildings. And then I met Marcus Chen at a gallery opening, all confident smiles and designer suits. And I made the mistake of thinking his charm was genuine. "You're too smart to be this beautiful," he'd said, handing me champagne. "It's intimidating." I should have heard the warning in those words. Too smart. As if intelligence and beauty couldn't coexist, as if being both was somehow threatening. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. Not because he loved me, I'd later learn, but because dating a successful architect opened doors for his struggling tech startup. I was the credibility he needed, the accomplished girlfriend he could parade at investor meetings. The proposal happened at Rosewood Manor during one of our weekend tours. I'd fallen in love with the estate, a sprawling historic property on 12 acres, complete with a grand ballroom, manicured gardens, and a view of the mountains that took my breath away. The owners were elderly, preparing to sell to a hotel chain that would tear down the historic buildings for a modern resort. Marcus went down on one knee in the rose garden, tourists watching and applauding, and I said yes while simultaneously calculating how I could save the estate from demolition. That night, alone in my real office, not the modest one Marcus knew about, I made calls. By morning, I'd assembled the financing. Within a week, through a labyrinth of shell companies and carefully structured trusts, I'd purchased Rosewood Manor for $8.3 million. Marcus never knew. How could he? He thought I made a decent salary, enough to split rent on our nice but not extravagant apartment. He had no idea about the inheritance from my maternal grandmother, carefully invested and grown into a substantial fortune. No idea about my side business consulting on luxury developments under a pseudonym. No idea that his practical, down-to-earth fiancé was worth more than his entire startup. I kept it hidden for good reason. 3 previous relationships had taught me that money changed people. The moment men discovered my wealth, they became different creatures. Some parasitic, some resentful, all of them viewing me as a resource rather than a person. So when Marcus suggested we be realistic about wedding costs, I agreed. When he insisted we split everything 50-50 to keep things equal, I nodded. When he asked me to downplay my success at his investor meetings so I don't feel overshadowed, I complied. I told myself I was being cautious. Looking back, I was conducting an experiment. I wanted to see who Marcus really was when he thought he had the upper hand. The first crack appeared 6 months into our engagement. I came home early from a site visit to find Marcus in our bedroom, on the phone, speaking in Mandarin. He didn't know I'd been taking lessons, preparing to surprise him with fluency before we visited his family in Shanghai. "No, she has no idea about Victoria," he said, laughing. "Emma's too busy with her little building projects to notice anything. Besides, I need Emma for the wedding. Her connections will be there. But don't worry, after the wedding, we'll see." My hand froze on the doorknob. I stood in the hallway, my heart hammering, listening as he detailed his relationship with Victoria Ashford, the daughter of one of his major investors. How they'd been seeing each other for months. How the wedding was really about cementing his business relationships. I should have confronted him. Instead, I backed away silently, drove to my real office, and started making calls. By nightfall, I'd hired the best private investigator in the city. By the end of the week, I had proof. Dozens of photos. Marcus and Victoria at restaurants I couldn't afford on my architect's salary. Text messages discussing their future together. Hotel receipts from weekends he'd claimed to be at tech conferences. The smart thing would have been to call off the wedding, expose him, move on. But I'd already spent 6 months planning every detail at Rosewood Manor. I'd already fallen in love with that venue, with the vision of restoration I had for it. And as I sat in my office, looking at the evidence of Marcus's betrayal, a different plan began forming. What if I let him continue? What if I gave him exactly what he wanted? A wedding at Rosewood Manor, with all my professional connections in attendance, and then revealed the truth at the perfect moment. The thought was intoxicating, but I needed insurance, needed to know exactly how deep his betrayal ran. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I hired more investigators. I dug deeper, and what I found was so much worse than infidelity. Marcus's startup, Chance Tech, was built on stolen intellectual property. Code and algorithms developed by a former partner named David Kim, whom Marcus had systematically pushed out of the company. David had been too trusting, too focused on the technology to protect his interests legally. By the time he realized what was happening, Marcus had restructured the company, rewritten history, and erased David's contributions. David had tried to fight back, but without resources or proof, he'd been destroyed. Last I heard, he was working as a coding instructor at a community college. His dreams shattered, his reputation ruined by Marcus's whisper campaign. There were others, too. A female developer who'd reported Marcus for harassment, only to be fired and blacklisted. An investor who'd questioned his ethics and found himself mysteriously shut out of deal flow across the city. Marcus Chen built his success on the broken backs of people who'd trusted him. And now he was planning to do the same to me. I could have exposed him immediately. Instead, I waited, watching, documenting, planning. I spent the next year pretending nothing was wrong, acting the role of blissfully ignorant fiancé while secretly orchestrating something much bigger than simple revenge. First, I quietly reached out to David Kim. He was bitter, broken, barely surviving on his teaching salary. I offered him something better, a position as Chief Technology Officer at a company I was secretly founding, with a salary that would restore his dignity and equity that would make him wealthy if we succeeded. It took 3 meetings before he trusted me enough to accept. I had to share my own story, show him the evidence I'd gathered on Marcus, prove I was serious about justice rather than just using him for my own revenge. "Why are you doing this?" David asked during our final meeting, his eyes wet with tears he was too proud to shed. "You could just walk away." "Because men like Marcus don't stop until someone makes them," I replied. "And because you deserved better. You all did." Next, I found the female developer, Sarah Martinez. She'd left tech entirely, was working as a barista while trying to rebuild her confidence. I offered her the lead developer position, matched with trauma-informed counseling and a workplace where harassment would never be tolerated. One by one, I assembled a team of people Marcus had destroyed. We worked in secret, building a competitor to Chance Tech that would launch exactly 1 week after my wedding. A better product, built ethically, with proper attribution and compensation for everyone involved. Meanwhile, I continued planning the wedding. Marcus thought I was maxing out credit cards and borrowing from my modest savings to afford Rosewood Manor. In reality, I was restoring the estate to its former glory, spending millions on renovations that would make it the most sought-after venue in the state. "You're spending too much," Marcus would say, frowning at the invoices I carefully edited to show lower numbers. "We need to be practical, Emma. This is getting out of hand." "It's our special day," I'd reply softly, playing the role of emotional bride. "Don't you want it to be perfect?" He'd sigh, as if indulging a child, and return to texting Victoria. He thought he was humoring me. He had no idea I was building his stage for his downfall. The wedding planning became my cover for everything. Every meeting with caterers was also a meeting with lawyers. Every dress fitting was scheduled back-to-back with business strategy sessions. Every taste testing was followed by consultations with PR firms about how to handle the media circus I was orchestrating. Marcus's parents flew in from Shanghai for an engagement party. Wealthy, traditional, proud of their son's success, they treated me with polite condescension. I was acceptable, they seemed to say, but not quite what they'd hoped for their brilliant son. "Emma works very hard," Marcus's mother said, her English precise and cutting. "It's admirable for a woman to have career ambitions. Though, of course, after marriage, family becomes priority." I smiled, nodded, said all the expected things while mentally reviewing the portfolio I'd built. In addition to Rosewood Manor, I now owned 3 other historic properties, 2 successful businesses, and enough investments to never work again if I chose. But Marcus's mother wasn't entirely wrong about priorities. My priority had become justice, not just for me, but for everyone Marcus had hurt. The breaking point came 8 months before the wedding. Marcus came home drunk from a Chance Tech celebration, bragging about a deal he'd just closed with Victoria's father. "10 million in funding," he slurred, pulling me onto his lap. "And I didn't even have to marry his daughter to get it." He laughed at his own joke. "Though between you and me, Victoria's much more my speed than you are. She understands business. She doesn't waste time on dead buildings and historical preservation." I felt the rage build in my chest, hot and sharp. But I kept my face neutral, even managed a laugh. "You're drunk, Marcus. Let's get you to bed." "I'm serious," he continued, his guard completely down. "This wedding is just business, Emma. Victoria knows that. Her father knows that. After the wedding, all your architect friends will invest in Chance Tech, and then—" He made a dismissive gesture. "Well, we'll see what happens then." "What do you mean, we'll see?" I asked carefully. He tapped the side of his nose, suddenly conspiratorial. "Let's just say I've been very careful about our prenup. You'll keep your little architecture business, and I'll keep Chance Tech. Clean break, minimal mess. Give it a year, maybe 2. He passed out before I could respond, sprawled across our bed, snoring. I stood there for a long moment, looking at this man I'd almost married, this stranger who'd planned my usefulness down to the month. Then I went to my hidden office and adjusted my timeline. Not a year or 2, 8 months. The wedding would be his undoing, not his opportunity. The next morning, Marcus remembered nothing, or pretended not to. Either way, I was done pretending. "I've been thinking," I said over coffee, my voice sweet and uncertain. "Maybe we should have the wedding on a Saturday instead of Sunday, and maybe expand the guest list. I know it's more expensive, but—" Marcus frowned. "Emma, we talked about this. Sunday is cheaper, and the guest list is already too long." "But all your investors want to come," I pressed. "And Victoria's father specifically mentioned he couldn't make Sunday work. Wouldn't it be good for business to accommodate them?" I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. The wedding wasn't about us. It was about his networking opportunity. If moving it to Saturday meant more investors, more connections, more chances to leverage my professional relationships for his gain— "You know what? You're right," he said finally. "Saturday makes sense, and we can probably squeeze in a few more guests, make sure all the Chance Tech board members get invitations." "Of course," I agreed. "I'll handle everything." And I did. I expanded the guest list to include not just Marcus's targets, but mine. David Kim and Sarah Martinez would be there, along with every other person Marcus had betrayed. I invited journalists who specialized in tech industry exposés. I invited lawyers who'd been trying to build cases against Chance Tech for years. I invited investors who valued ethics over profits. I also sent a special invitation to Victoria Ashford, though not as a guest, as Marcus's +1 to the rehearsal dinner, carefully coordinated to ensure maximum drama. The months flew by in a blur of final preparations. Every detail was perfect. The security I hired for the event wasn't the standard wedding security. They were former FBI agents specializing in corporate fraud, ready to document everything. The videographer I selected wasn't just capturing wedding memories, he was building evidence files with hidden cameras throughout the venue. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus came home with news. "Victoria and I decided to end things," he announced, his face carefully composed into regret. "Her father wants her to focus on business, and I need to prioritize us, our wedding, our future." "Oh, Marcus," I said, pulling him into a hug to hide my smile. He couldn't see that I'd just received a text from my investigator. Marcus hadn't ended things with Victoria. They'd simply decided to be more careful, to wait until after the wedding to announce their surprise relationship. In fact, they'd already booked a secret vacation together for 3 days after the wedding. While I was supposedly on our honeymoon, Marcus planned to be in Bali with Victoria, celebrating his successful con. Except I'd already canceled his tickets and booked the resort for a corporate retreat with all of Chance Tech's investors, scheduled to discuss Marcus's ethics and the stolen intellectual property his company was built on. 1 week before the wedding, I had my final meeting with my team. David, Sarah, and 8 other people Marcus had destroyed gathered in my real office, looking at the comprehensive plan I'd spent 2 years building. "This isn't just about revenge," I told them. "It's about justice. It's about making sure he can't do this to anyone else. And it's about building something better from the ashes of what he tried to destroy." David raised his glass of champagne. "To Emma," he said, "the most terrifying project manager I've ever worked with." We all laughed, the sound bitter and sweet in equal measure. 3 days before the wedding, Marcus's parents arrived. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for tomorrow night, the wedding for Saturday, and my revelation for, well, that timing was still flexible. I wanted to find the perfect moment, the instant where the maximum number of people would witness his downfall. That night, lying in bed next to Marcus, I thought about my mother, about how she'd cleaned houses for people who never saw her as human, just as furniture that occasionally needed replacing, about how she'd died with nothing, leaving me only the fierce belief that I deserved better. "I did it, Mom," I whispered into the darkness. "I built something they can't take away." Marcus stirred in his sleep, reaching for me unconsciously. Even now, some part of him probably believed he loved me in his own way, that his betrayal was justified by business needs, by ambition, by the simple fact that he'd convinced himself he deserved whatever he wanted. Tomorrow he'd learn differently. The rehearsal dinner was held at Rosewood Manor's smaller ballroom, an intimate gathering of just the wedding party and immediate family. Or so Marcus thought. I'd arranged for the room to have one-way mirrors along the back wall, behind which sat 20 of the wedding's special guests, investors, journalists, lawyers, and everyone Marcus had betrayed. They couldn't be seen, but they could see and hear everything. Marcus wore his best suit, playing the role of devoted groom. His parents were charming, asking me about my work with polite disinterest. His best man, an old college friend who knew about Victoria, kept shooting me apologetic glances he thought I didn't notice. Halfway through dinner, Victoria arrived. Marcus froze, his fork suspended in midair. "Victoria? What are you doing here?" "You invited me?" she said, confused, waving the invitation I'd had delivered to her. "As your +1 to the rehearsal dinner." The room fell silent. Marcus's mother's eyes narrowed. His father leaned forward, suddenly interested. "I didn't—" Marcus started, then caught himself. There must be some mistake. "No mistake," I said cheerfully, standing up. "I thought it would be nice for your girlfriend to join us. After all, she'll be at the wedding tomorrow." Marcus's face drained of color. "Emma, you've been seeing Victoria for 18 months, I continued, my voice calm and pleasant as if I were discussing the weather. "I know about the hotels, the restaurants, the vacation you have planned for 3 days from now." His mother gasped. His father's expression turned thunderous. The wedding party sat frozen, unsure whether to stay or flee. "I also know," I continued, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the room's projection system, "about David Kim, about Sarah Martinez, about everyone you've stolen from, manipulated and destroyed to build Chance Tech." The screen lit up with evidence. Photos, emails, code comparisons showing the stolen intellectual property, financial records documenting fraud, testimony from victims. "This is insane," Marcus said, finding his voice. "Emma, you're embarrassing yourself. These are lies." "Are they?" I asked. "David, would you like to come out?" The door opened, and David Kim walked in, followed by Sarah Martinez and 6 others. Marcus's face went from white to gray. "Hello, Marcus," David said quietly. "It's been a while." What happened next was beautiful chaos. Marcus tried to explain, to justify, to spin the narrative. His parents demanded answers. Victoria, realizing she'd been used just as much as I had, started asking her own pointed questions. Meanwhile, behind the one-way mirrors, investors were reviewing the evidence on tablets I'd had prepared. Journalists were confirming sources. Lawyers were making calls. By the time dessert was supposed to be served, Marcus's entire world was crumbling. His parents announced they were returning to Shanghai immediately. Victoria left in tears. The wedding party scattered, sensing disaster. Marcus stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, looking at me with something like recognition finally dawning in his eyes. "You planned this," he said. "All of it. The wedding, the venue, everything." "Yes," I replied simply. "You're going to ruin me." "No, Marcus, you ruined yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." He looked around the room, at the evidence still displayed on screens, at the people he'd betrayed watching him with satisfied expressions. "The wedding tomorrow is canceled," I finished. "Except it's not actually. See, I've already paid for everything. The flowers, the food, the music. It would be a shame to waste it." His eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" I smiled, and it wasn't kind. "I'm saying you should leave now. Security will escort you from the property. The wedding will go on tomorrow, but you won't be attending." "You can't do that. I'm the groom. Half our guests are my colleagues." "We're your colleagues," I corrected. "I suspect by tomorrow morning, most of them will have other plans. As for the venue..." I paused, savoring the moment. "Marcus, did you ever wonder how we afforded Rosewood Manor? How a struggling architect managed to book the most exclusive venue in the state?" Understanding flickered across his face, followed by disbelief, then something like horror. "I own it," I said softly. "I've owned it for 3 years. Every tour we took, every planning meeting, every time you complained about the cost, I was walking through my own property." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hidden observers behind the mirrors seemed to hold their breath. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "You're just an architect. You don't have that kind of money." "I'm not just anything, Marcus. That was your mistake. You saw what you wanted to see, believed what was convenient to believe, and never once wondered if the woman you were conning might be smarter than you." Security appeared in the doorway, 2 large men in suits who'd been briefed on exactly how this evening would end. "Escort Mr. Chen from the property," I instructed. "He's no longer welcome at Rosewood Manor." As they took his arms, Marcus tried one last time. "Emma, please. We can talk about this. I made mistakes, but..." "The gates lock at midnight," I interrupted. "After that, you won't be able to enter the property at all. Not for the wedding, not ever. I suggest you make your peace with that." They led him away, his protests echoing down the marble corridors. When the sound finally faded, I turned to the one-way mirrors and pressed the button that made them transparent. 20 faces looked back at me, expressions ranging from shock to admiration to something like fear. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "The wedding tomorrow will proceed as planned, minus the groom. Instead, it will be a celebration of something better. The launch of a new company built on ethical principles, proper attribution, and compensation for the people who actually did the work." David Kim and Sarah Martinez will be introducing their new roles as co-founders of Rosewood Technologies. I hope you'll all stay to witness it. An investor in the front row started clapping, then another. Within moments, the room erupted in applause. I smiled, accepting their recognition, but inside I was thinking about tomorrow. about the moment when Marcus would arrive at Rosewood Manor's gates and find them locked, about his wedding transformed into his public trial. The revenge wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time, I'd make sure everyone was watching. Saturday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I woke in the master suite of Rosewood Manor, my manor, and watched the sunrise paint the mountains gold through floor-to-ceiling windows Marcus had never known existed. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Marcus had tried to enter the property at 4 a.m., then 5 a.m., then 6 a.m. Each time, security had turned him away. The cameras showed him arguing, pleading, finally threatening legal action. His calls to the venue went straight to voicemail. His calls to me went unanswered. At 7 a.m., he tried a different approach. Victoria arrived at the gates in her father's Mercedes, attempting to gain entry as a wedding guest. Security was polite but firm. Mr. Chen had been banned from the property, and anyone attempting to help him circumvent that ban would also be refused entry. By 8 a.m., local news vans were gathering outside the estate's perimeter. Someone, probably Marcus, had tipped them off about a corporate scandal unfolding at a society wedding. They had no idea how right they were. Sarah Martinez knocked on my door at 8:30, carrying coffee and a tablet. "The investors are all confirmed for this afternoon. David's presentation is ready, and Marcus just posted on social media claiming you've kidnapped him." I laughed, accepting the coffee. Kidnapped? From his own wedding? "He's saying you've illegally locked him out of the venue, that he paid for everything and you're holding it hostage." Sarah's smile was sharp. His post already has 300 comments, most of them from people who've worked with him sharing their own stories. I pulled up social media on my phone. Marcus's post was a masterclass in desperation. "My fiancé has locked me out of our wedding venue in a jealous rage. After I've spent thousands on this wedding, she's trying to ruin everything because she can't handle my success. Please, help me get inside to marry the woman I love." The comments were not going the way he'd hoped. "Interesting that the woman you love isn't Emma, who you're supposedly marrying today," read one. "Didn't you steal code from David Kim?" "Karma's a bitch," read another. "I worked at Chance Tech for 6 months. You're a predator and a thief. I hope she destroys you," said a third. I set my phone down and turned to Sarah. "Is everyone ready?" "David's nervous but prepared. The others are already setting up in the ballroom. The journalists have been briefed on the timeline, and your lawyer called." Marcus's attempt at a restraining order was denied. Apparently, it's hard to get a restraining order against someone on their own property. I dressed carefully, not in a wedding gown but in a tailored suit. Deep emerald green, armor disguised as elegance. My mother's pearl necklace at my throat. Her voice in my head. "Stand tall. They can't break what they can't bend." By 10 a.m., guests were beginning to arrive. Not the wedding guests Marcus had invited. Most of them had canceled overnight, but a different crowd. Tech journalists, ethics lawyers, former Chance Tech employees, investors who'd been investigating Marcus for months, and every single person Marcus had destroyed on his climb to success. The ballroom had been transformed. Instead of wedding decorations, there were presentation screens. Instead of a bride's table, there was a panel discussion set up. Instead of a celebration of love, this would be a reckoning. Victoria Ashford arrived at 11 a.m., this time on foot, having walked from where she'd parked outside the estate's perimeter. Security let her through. She was scheduled to speak. I met her in the library, away from the growing crowd. She looked different from last night, older somehow, the shine of privilege dimmed by reality. "Why did you invite me?" she asked without preamble. "To humiliate me?" To give you a choice, I replied. You're a victim too, Victoria. Marcus used you just like he used everyone else. Your father's money, your connections, your reputation. You were always just a resource to him. Her eyes filled with tears. I thought he loved me. He loves what people can give him. The moment you stop being useful, you become disposable. I pulled out a folder and handed it to her. These are text messages from last week. Marcus discussing with his business partner how to leverage Victoria's family for the next funding round, then discussing which investor's daughter he should target next. She read in silence, her face hardening with each page. When she finished, she looked up at me with something like respect. What do you want from me? The truth, in front of everyone, about how he manipulated you, used your father's investment, made promises he never intended to keep. But only if you want to. This is your choice. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, what time do you need me to speak? At noon, Marcus made his most dramatic attempt yet. He arrived with a lawyer, demanding entry, threatening lawsuits, claiming breach of contract. The cameras caught every moment as his lawyer read from a document claiming Marcus had paid for the venue. My lawyer, a formidable woman named Patricia Chen, stepped out to meet them at the gates. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. "You have no contract with Rosewood Manor. The venue was booked and paid for by Emma Sullivan, the property's owner. You were extended the courtesy of being included in those plans. That courtesy has been revoked. She can't do this. We're supposed to be married today. A wedding requires 2 willing participants. Ms. Sullivan is no longer willing. Now, you can leave peacefully, or I can have you arrested for trespassing. Your choice." Marcus's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. After a moment, they retreated to the parking area beyond the gates, but Marcus didn't leave. He stayed there, pacing, making calls, his desperation visible even from a distance. At 1 p.m., the event began. Not a wedding, but something better. A symposium on corporate ethics, stolen intellectual property, and systemic abuse in tech startups. David Kim spoke first, his voice steady despite years of trauma. He walked through the timeline of Chance Tech's founding, showing with painful clarity how Marcus had systematically stolen his work, rewrote company history, and destroyed his reputation when he tried to fight back. "I lost everything," David said, his face projected on screens throughout the ballroom. "My career, my savings, my faith in the industry I dedicated my life to. And I'm not alone. Marcus Chen built his empire on the ruins of people who trusted him." Sarah Martinez spoke next, detailing the harassment she'd endured, the retaliation when she reported it, the whisper campaign that had blacklisted her from the industry. Then came others, 6 more people, each with their own story of manipulation and destruction. The investors who'd come to celebrate Marcus's wedding sat in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. Financial records showing systematically stolen IP, emails detailing harassment cover-ups, testimony after testimony building an irrefutable case. Outside, Marcus was watching a live stream on his phone. The cameras caught the moment he realized what was happening, that his wedding had been transformed into his trial, that every powerful person he'd hoped to impress was witnessing his exposure. He ran to the gates, shouting to be let in, to defend himself. Security held firm. At 2 p.m., Victoria Ashford took the stage. "My name is Victoria Ashford," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "and I was stupid enough to believe Marcus Chen loved me." She detailed their relationship with unflinching honesty, How Marcus had pursued her at precisely the moment her father was considering investing in Chance Tech. How he'd made promises about their future while planning a wedding with another woman. How he'd used her family connections while keeping her hidden like a dirty secret. "He told me Emma was just for show," Victoria said, her voice growing stronger. "That she was useful for her architecture connections but meant nothing emotionally. What I didn't realize was that he said the same things about me. To him, we weren't people, we were assets to be exploited." When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Victoria left the stage with her head high, no longer a victim, but a survivor speaking truth. The afternoon continued with a presentation from my lawyer about the legal consequences Marcus now faced. Multiple lawsuits for intellectual property theft, a criminal investigation into securities fraud, civil suits from former employees. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling in real time. Finally, at 4 p.m., I took the stage. The ballroom fell silent. Every eye was on me. Journalists with recording devices, investors with calculating expressions, victims with hopeful faces. 3 years ago, I began. I bought this property. Not because I wanted a wedding venue, but because I wanted to save something beautiful from destruction. I had no idea then that this estate would become the stage for a different kind of salvation. I told them everything. About the experiment of hiding my wealth, about discovering Marcus's betrayal, about the decision to build something better instead of just exposing something rotten. Revenge, I said, is often portrayed as a dish best served cold. But that's not quite right. The best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about creation. It's about taking everything someone tried to steal from you and building something they could never touch. On the screens behind me, images appeared. Rosewood Technologies logo, the team David and Sarah had assembled, the revolutionary software they'd developed ethically with proper attribution and compensation for everyone involved. "Today was supposed to be my wedding day," I continued. "Instead, it's the launch of something better. A company built on the principle that success doesn't require destroying others, that you can compete without stealing, that business can be both profitable and ethical." I looked directly into the cameras, knowing Marcus was watching. "You tried to use me, Marcus. You tried to use everyone in this room. You built your success on theft, manipulation, and destruction of people who trusted you. But here's what you never understood. The people you destroy don't just disappear. They regroup. They rebuild. And sometimes they come back stronger than you ever were." The applause started slowly, then built to a crescendo. As it did, notifications began flooding my phone. News outlets picking up the story, social media exploding with reactions, and most importantly, messages from Chance Tech's board of directors calling emergency meetings. At 5 p.m., as golden afternoon light streamed through the ballroom's windows, we held the official launch. David Kim was announced as CEO of Rosewood Technologies. Sarah Martinez as Chief Technology Officer. Every person Marcus had destroyed was given a position, equity, and the opportunity to rebuild what he'd taken from them. The investors who'd come expecting a wedding stayed for the pitch deck. By 6 p.m., we had verbal commitments for $30 million in first-round funding. Outside, Marcus finally understood it was over. The cameras caught him slumping against his car, his lawyer speaking urgently on the phone, his empire collapsing around him while, inside the gates he could never cross, something better was being born. As the sun set, turning Rosewood Manor's stone walls amber and gold, I stood on the terrace with a glass of champagne, watching my guests mingle below. This view, this moment, was what I'd worked 3 years to achieve. My phone rang. Marcus, calling from just beyond the gates. I answered. Emma. His voice was hollow. Please, we need to talk. We just did, Marcus. In front of everyone who mattered. Was there something you wanted to add? I loved you. In my own way, I did. No, I said gently. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. You've destroyed everything. My company, my reputation, my future. I haven't destroyed anything, Marcus. I've revealed what was always there. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided people were resources instead of human beings. Silence. Then, what happens now? Now? You face the consequences of your choices. The lawsuits, the investigations, the loss of everything you stole. And I looked out over the estate, at the people celebrating below, at the future I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. I move forward, with my company, my property, and my self-respect intact. I'll fight this. I'll come back from this. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but not here. The gates are locked, Marcus. They'll stay locked. And even if you rebuild somehow, somewhere else, you'll do it knowing that everyone who matters knows exactly who you are. I ended the call and blocked his number. Below, someone called my name. David was waving me down. Investors gathered around him, eager to discuss the future. I descended the terrace stairs, leaving Marcus in the past where he belonged. The next morning, I woke to news alerts. Chance-Tech's board had voted unanimously to remove Marcus as CEO. 3 major investors had pulled their funding. The SEC had opened a formal investigation. And Victoria Ashford's father had released a statement condemning Marcus's behavior and praising the courage of everyone who'd spoken out. But the news that made me smile was smaller, more personal. David had posted a photo from last night, the Rosewood Technologies team, arms around each other, smiling genuine smiles. The caption read, "Sometimes the best revenge is building something beautiful with the people who refuse to stay broken." I saved the photo and sent it to my mother's old email address, even though no one would receive it. We did it, Mom. We built something they can't take away. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Team breakfast in the Manor's dining room? David's buying. I smiled and texted back. I'll be right down. Also, I own the dining room, so technically I'm buying. Her response was a laughing emoji followed by, details, details. As I dressed for the day, not armor this time, just comfortable clothes, I thought about revenge, justice, and transformation. Marcus had planned to use my dream wedding as a networking opportunity before discarding me. Instead, I'd transformed his wedding into my triumph, his stage into my courtroom, his opportunity into his reckoning. The gates of Rosewood Manor would remain locked to him forever. But they would open wide for everyone else, for the employees of Rosewood Technologies, for the events we'd host, for the people we'd help. 3 years of planning, 3 years of patience, 3 years of building something he couldn't imagine, couldn't see coming, couldn't stop. And in the end, he'd walked right into it, arrogant and blind, thinking he was the one in control. I descended the grand staircase where I'd once imagined walking in a wedding dress. The morning light through the windows was perfect, illuminating portraits I'd hung of forgotten innovators, people whose contributions had been stolen by those who claimed their glory. David Kim's portrait would be going up next week. Sarah Martinez's the week after. A reminder that history remembers the truth, even if it takes time. In the dining room, my team was already gathering. Laughter, conversation, the sound of people who'd survived and were now thriving. They looked up as I entered, faces lighting with welcome. "To Emma," David said, raising his coffee cup. the most terrifying wedding planner in history. To Emma, they echoed, laughing. I sat down among them, among the people Marcus had tried to destroy, and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not because I'd destroyed him, though I had. Not because I'd gotten revenge, though I had. But because I'd built something better from the wreckage of his betrayal. Something real, ethical, lasting. The gates were locked, but inside those gates, everything was finally open. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. This isn't over. I showed it to Patricia, my lawyer. She smiled grimly. Let him try. We have documentation of everything. He can't touch you. I deleted the message and turned back to my team, to the breakfast, to the future. Marcus could spend the rest of his life trying to get past those gates, trying to rebuild what he'd lost, trying to convince people he was the victim. But I knew the truth, and now everyone else did too. Some gates, once locked, stay locked forever. And some endings are really just the beginning of something far better than what came before. I looked around the table at the faces of people who'd refused to stay defeated, who'd taken their pain and transformed it into purpose, who'd built something beautiful from the ruins of betrayal. So, I said, smiling, let's talk about the future. Rosewood Technologies has a lot of work to do. And just like that, we moved forward. The wedding that never happened became the launch that changed everything. The venue Marcus could never enter became a symbol of transformation. And the woman he'd underestimated became the architect of his downfall and the founder of something he could never destroy. 3 years of planning, 1 perfect day of execution, a lifetime of consequences for him, a lifetime of possibilities for us. The gates were locked, and we were finally free. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.